Hi, in this lecture, we discuss security in an applied context. In particular, we talk about the need for trusted third party whenever we deal with active adversaries, which is pretty much what happens in real life. We also discuss the use of digital signatures, which is an instance of public key cryptography that we haven't discussed so far in this series of lectures. And finally, we'll say a few words about internet security. So, first, why do we need trusted third party when dealing with security in applied context? So let's recap what the Diffie-Hellman key exchange, as our use case, we'll recap the Diffie-Hellman key exchange protocol and see how things can go really wrong when adversaries don't just listen to the communications, but also take some liberties with the property, with the protocol and try to confuse the players. So the Diffie-Hellman key exchange protocol is a protocol between two players who want to create a secret key that they can use, for example, as a secret session key, okay? So the public values are p a prime and a basis g, which is a number less than p. So Alice and Bob draw draw numbers a and b respectively, and then they produce Alice produces g to the a mod p, Bob produces g to the b mod p, and then they exchange those values. Now, each of them can recover g to the ab mod p, which is the shared secret session key. So, what can go wrong in the case of an active adversary? We said before that if the discrete log problem is secure, then an adversary listening to the communication probably should not be able to recover the key. But what if the adversary does more than just listening? So here, assume that the adversary tries to, intercepts the communication and plays the protocol with both Alice and Bob, pretending to be Bob when talking to Alice and pretending to be Alice talking to Bob. Now, what that means is such an adversary can exchange, create a shared session key with both Alice and Bob, pretending to be, by impersonating them both. And then at the end of this attack, the adversary will have a shared key with Alice and a shared key with Bob. And what they can do is either, well, first of all, they can certainly relay messages of Alice to Bob and back and forth, just and listening to those conversations. Okay, what they can do is also flat out send messages that are fake. Okay, so what it means is Alice could think that they created a session key for secure communication with Bob, while really they're talking to an adversary. Okay, that is known as the man in the middle attack. So we need somehow a trusted third party to authenticate the communication so that Alice knows that she's exchanging a key with Bob and not with an adversary. So how can we do that? So first, let's present a basic idea of how to use symmetric key cryptography to ensure them to help Alice establish a communication with Bob, and that results in them sharing a secret session key that they can use, for example, with a block cipher. Okay, so now we have modeled the trusted third party as a server here. Okay, and what that server is going to do is first, originally, that server has a key shared with Alice. So that means that prior to this initiation, Alice already shares a key with the server. Then Alice, also the server is assumed to share a key with Bob. Okay, so Bob and the server, as well as Alice with the server, can have secure communications. But then Alice wants to talk to Bob directly. Okay, so there needs to be a new key created so that Bob can talk to Alice. So how are we going to do this? Alice will first send a request. So she encrypts the name Bob and some information about her intended communication with Bob. And then she encrypts that with the key she shares with the server and sends it to the server. Okay. Then the server will draw a new key, a new session key. The server creates it and then encrypts it both. So performs two separate encryptions, one with the key that the server shares with Alice and one with the key that the server shares with Bob. So they create an encryption of the key they've created under the keys that they share with Alice and Bob. And then the server sends that both of these values to Alice. So Alice, having the decryption key for one of these encryption, she learns the key. Okay, she learns the session key. And then she sends this to Bob as part of the initiation of the communication. Okay, so she says to Bob, hey, let's talk. And so she sends that encryption to Bob, who then is able to answer, to decrypt the encryption of the session key. Then at this point, both Alice and Bob are in possession of a secret session key, and they can start a conversation with confidentiality by encrypting with this key. Okay. Now, there are a number of problems that some variants attempted to fix. So historical variants of this general idea include the Needham-Schroeder scheme and the Otway-Rees scheme. So some of the biggest problems that we have here is that if, for example, one session key has been intercepted together with this communication, of course, the session key encrypted under the key that Bob shares, this could be intercepted. This is going through the network, and we don't assume the network itself to be secure. So it might be listened to by adversaries. Now, if session key is compromised, then it seems like an adversary will be able to initiate conversations with Bob in the future, pretending to be Alice. So that's a problem. So somehow we need to have mechanisms that make sure that even if a session key gets intercepted, there will be no way for an adversary to use that particular session key in the future. So the mechanism, so the protocol for this that is currently being used and that is secure with respect to this particular scenario is Kerberos. Okay, Kerberos is being used in practice. So let's see how this works. So in this situation, we assume that a client wants to initiate a communication with a service. And at the end of this initiation, we want the client and the service to have a shared session key that can be used to encrypt the communication between them. Now, the server is in fact two servers, an authentication server and what's called a ticket granting server. Okay. So in this situation, the client shares a key with the authentication server. Then the ticket granting server shares a key with the authentication server, and the ticket granting server also shares a key with the service. Okay. Now, Alice first sends her request to the authentication server saying who she is and what she wants to do. Then the authentication server creates a key for Alice and encrypts it with the key that they share with Alice and sends it together with the encryption of this particular message that contains Alice's information, the key, and a validity period. Okay, we don't want that the key that is created in the end between the client and the service be available for more than a certain duration, which is in this message that is encrypted with the key that the two servers share together. And that encryption is called the ticket granting ticket. Okay, and that's yet sent to Alice. Now, Alice cannot decrypt this. She doesn't even have the key for that. So that's just something she's going to send later. But first, she uses her key to decrypt the key that was sent to her in encrypted form by the authentication server. So at this point, she has the red key. Then she doesn't know how to decrypt, but she just sends this ticket back to the ticket granting server together with an encryption of her her information and a timestamp. You see, having time information here in those communications prevents the key that is eventually created from being used in the future if it's been exposed. Now, those two messages get sent to the ticket granting server. So bear in mind here, Alice has basically done nothing, just taken this ticket that was sent from the authentication server and just sent it to the ticket granting server. Now, the ticket granting server first uses this key that they share with the authentication server to decrypt the information in ticket granting tickets, okay? That gives them in particular the red key that Alice has from the authentication server. Then the ticket granting server, creates a new key, like a blue key here, okay? That's going to be used between the client and the service. And they encrypt it with the red key that Alice has and with the black key, which they share with the service. And in this encryption, there is Alice's information, the blue key, and the validity period. Now, the ticket granting server sends all of that to Alice. Alice is able to decrypt this part with her red key, and that gives her the session key. Now, at this point, she has the session key, but not the service. So she sends that ticket here. She's not able to decrypt that information, but she gets to send it to the service together with an encryption under the blue key of, again, her personal information and a timestamp. Timestamps are really important, again, to make sure that the keys are only used during the validity period. And then she sends all of that to the service. The service is able to first decrypt this and then learns the blue key and that Alice is trying to talk to them. And with the blue key, they can decrypt this and confirm that this is really Alice they're talking to and that everything is happening during the right period of time. And so now that they have this blue key and they share it with Alice, the last thing they do is they encrypt time information. And this time information is sent to Alice, who can see as it's a confirmation that everything was received and that they really are talking to the service and not to some impersonator. And at this point, they can start a communication with the shared secret key that is the blue key here. So it's a very convoluted strategy, but that really avoids cases where, insecurities due to the case where, for example, the blue key is compromised together with some of those tickets. Now, of course, it's not absolutely secure against all key exposures, in particular, if those keys that Alice share with the authentication server, for example, or this key that the service shares with the server get compromised, then bad thing can still happen. So it's not secure against every possible scenarios, but at least it's secure against the likely scenario that one day one of these many session keys gets compromised. So Kerberos is used in many operating systems. It was developed by MIT in 1988, and since then it's been used in some of the most operating systems in the world. So it's a very classic protocol. Now let's talk about digital signatures and certificates, which are another way that we can use trusted third parties in order to initiate communications. So digital signature schemes, what do they do? So in this scheme, you have Alice and Bob. The goal of Alice is to convince Bob of the authenticity of her message, okay? So she derives a pair of keys. One is private, one is public. So digital signature schemes in particular are in the realm of public key cryptography. The green key, which is public, is sent to the world. In particular, Bob is assumed to have it. Then with her private key, she derives a signature and she sends the signature together with the message to Bob. And then Bob, with the public key, can decide, can verify the validity of the message. Of the signature and the authenticity of the message. Now, the security of a digital signature scheme is essentially the same as, the notion of security is essentially the same as that of a Mac, in the sense that the goal of the adversary is to create an existential forgery, so create a valid pair message signature. without having the secret key. Now they have the public key, just not the secret one. With the Mac, of course, they had no key. So they need to make sure that, of course, this message with the public key satisfies the verification step. Now, so that's for the goal of the adversary. And just like in the Mac schemes, so the other thing that we have to define is the capacities of the adversary through the rules of the security game. And a classic one is what's called the chosen message attack, which is where an adversary has the power to request to perform their task. They can request valid pairs message and tag for the message of their choice, valid pair message signature. So so even with that capacity, they must be unable to provide an existential forgery. Okay. So how can we use trapdoor one-way functions? So quick recap on what they are. So it's a function that is easy to evaluate for people with with the public values, and hard to evaluate unless you know a secret. Okay, so evaluation is easy, and inversion is only easy if you have a key. Okay, so how can we use a trapdoor one-way function to sign? So what you can do is take a message, hash it, and then do the inversion on the hash of the one-way function. And that is your signature. And now anyone looking at the signature and having the public parameters can evaluate the one-way function, okay? And then what they get here, they can check whether or not it is equal to the hash of the message. And that is the verification step. So how could we do this on the example of the RSA one-way function? Remember, the RSA one-way function we successfully used it to perform public key encryption, but we can also do that. We can also use the same function to do signatures. So here, assume, so this is a quick recap. So we have that n equals p and q, where p and q are primes, and we have e and d such that e times d modulo p minus 1 q minus 1 equals 1, and d here is the secret value. So hash your message that produces a number, which so you feed to the inversion of the RSA one-way function, which essentially means that you've evaluated h to the power, you've raised it to the power d and reduced mod n, okay? And that is your signature. Then somebody who wants to verify your signature evaluates the RSA one-way function on the signature. So that means raising s to the power e mod n, okay? E being a public value. D is private, but E is public, so anybody can do that. And then once they get this value, they verify that s to the e mod n is equal to h. And if it is, they accept the signature as being valid. Now, how to use digital signatures to initiate a secure communication? This can be done with a certificate authority. So if Alice and Bob want to communicate, they can rely on a certificate authority. So what does the certificate authority do? They have a pair private public key, and they're trusted. What they do then is they provide certificates. Certificates have information about entities that may want to initiate communications. So for example, name and other kinds of information. And most importantly, they have the public key of these entities. And those certificates are signed by the certificate authority, meaning that if somebody trusts the certificate authority, then they can verify the signature of the certificate authority using the public key, and then they accept all the information as being valid, including the public key of the person who received the certificate from the certificate authority. So if Alice sees this certificate, she verifies the signature with the certificate authority's public key, which she can do as part of the digital signature scheme. And once she's accepted, then she knows that this really is the public key of Bob. And so what she can do is initiate a conversation with Bob, sending him messages with his public key. Now, what's really important to realize here is that there is a need for what's called a public key infrastructure. And public key infrastructure is the protocol by which the certificate authority will distribute all these keys to different players and the corresponding certificates. This is a very non-trivial task and needs to be implemented with care, and the resulting protocol is a PKI. Now, how does that work out as part of internet security? So certificate authorities play a crucial role in secure internet connections. So assume that Alice connects to a website. She'll gonna want to know she'll gonna want to know that the website that she's connecting to really is who they say they are. And how do we know that? It's because they provide a certificate. That certificate, of course, can be verified. In particular, it has a public key. So with that certificate comes along a public key. And that information is signed with the key of the certificate authority. So Alice can look at that information, verify the signature of the certificate authority, and at this point, she believes that this really is the key of the service of the internet website that she's trying to connect to. And that, when she has that, she can produce a random session key, encrypt it with encrypt it with the key of the website and send it to the website, which can decrypt it. And then at this point, they both share a session key. So these certificate authorities are a way to initiate a secure private communication between a client and a server. Now, in real life, the way you know that a website uses this kind of protocol is when you see the little padlock next on your browser next to the URL, and also when you see that URL starts with HTTPS as opposed to HTTP. Okay, so if you click on the padlock, you'll see some details about the certificate. So this is typically the kind of information you'll see. So information about the entity, some validity period too, right? So the certificates aren't valid forever, and also the key, in particular, the key by which you're going to be using in order to initiate the conversation. Okay, so it's got all this information plus more. I could not copy everything. And it's all signed, most importantly, by the certificate authority so that you accept the information as being valid. Now, finally, let's just mention how cryptography is used within internet security. So internet security is layered. So there's 7 layers in the OSI model. And so cryptography, different suites of cryptographic protocol play a role in different layers. In particular, some of the most important layers include the network layer. That's layer number 3. So the layers go all the way from physical layer to application layer. Okay, so an important layer is a layer where cryptography plays an important role is the network layer. At the network layer, the data travels as packets, and the packets of data have security, so encryption. So we guarantee their confidentiality, integrity, and authenticity through cryptographic protocols of the IPsec suite IPsec protocol that includes cryptographic primitives. Then another layer where cryptography plays an important role is the layer that's just above the network layer, called the transport layer. And at the transport layer, packets of data are recombined into actual files. One of the security protocol that acts at the transport layer is TLS, which stands for Transport Layer Security. And then the layer at the very top, the application layer, also is a layer where cryptography plays an important role. For example, through the SSH protocol, which stands for Secure Shell. So this is a picture of a shell, which is an interactive element where the user directly inputs information. So that's why this is at the application layer. So this is it. Thank you very much for your attention.